Samuel Bell, a young individual on the autism spectrum, proudly stepped into Meridian Trust Bank, his heart pounding with the excitement of opening his first bank account after months of diligent saving. This significant step towards independence was his biggest dream, to manage his own money. However, his hopes were about to be shattered by the prejudiced and condescending attitudes of the bank's insensitive teller, Miss Regina Vance, and its uncomprehending manager, Mr. Cedric Cooper. Just when everything seemed lost, an unexpected, calm, yet firm voice echoed through the bank's crowded hall. And to everyone's astonishment, it was realized that this voice belonged to a world-famous Hollywood actor, Keanu Reeves. What was about to unfold would shake not only that bank branch, but the hearts of everyone watching, once again revealing how devastating prejudice can be. What happens next will leave everyone speechless. Before we continue this poignant and powerful story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you also love such real-life inspired, awareness-raising stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow, another very special story will be waiting for you. That morning was one of the most important days of Samuel "Sam" Bell's life. He was 22 years old, and as an individual on the autism spectrum, had battled many of life's daily challenges, but had never given up. His biggest dream was to stand on his own 2 feet, to achieve financial independence. For months, he had been working part-time at a local library, carefully saving every penny he earned. And that day, he had set out for Meridian Trust Bank to open his first bank account with those savings. For him, this was much more than just opening an account. It was a way to bolster his self-confidence, a way to tell society, "I exist too." Before leaving home, he had meticulously checked the documents he had prepared over and over, his identification, and the notebook where he had written down all the necessary steps to open an account. Everything had to be perfect. He didn't want any setbacks. Would the bank officials understand his special situation? Or would he again encounter those familiar, condescending glances? This anxiety cast a small shadow on the excitement in his heart, but Sam was determined. "You can do this, Sam," he whispered to himself, looking at his reflection in the mirror. "Today is your day." When he entered Meridian Trust Bank through its massive glass doors, the crowd and noise inside momentarily startled him. The bank was experiencing the busy tempo of lunchtime. Long queues, impatiently waiting people, constantly ringing phones, and the mechanical, tired voices of the staff. Sam took a deep breath. Such crowded and noisy environments always made him a little uncomfortable. But today, he was determined to overcome this discomfort. Clutching the document folder tightly in his hand, he joined the queue in front of the account opening counter. While waiting, he mentally rehearsed the sentences he had practiced over and over. "Hello, I would like to open a savings account." A simple, clear sentence. But at that moment, even saying that sentence felt as difficult as climbing mountains. Meanwhile, in another corner of the bank, Keanu Reeves, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face and dark sunglasses to conceal his identity, looking like an ordinary customer, was waiting for his own personal banking transactions. He, too, was not very pleased with this crowd and noise, but there was nothing he could do. His eyes were observing the people around him, their facial expressions, their body language. This was a kind of professional habit for him. He was always, everywhere, in pursuit of human stories. And just then, Sam's anxious yet determined posture caught his attention. There was something different about this young man. Perhaps that invisible burden on his shoulders. Perhaps that pure, timid expression in his eyes. Keanu, for a reason he didn't know, started watching this young man. What was this young man's story? And how would this ordinary bank day turn into an experience for him? Finally, when it was Sam's turn, he walked towards the counter with trembling legs. Behind the counter sat a woman in her mid-30s, with blonde hair tied in a bun, wearing the bank's navy blue uniform, and a bored, impatient expression on her face. Her name tag read, Regina Vance, Customer Representative. Miss Vance glanced cursorily at Sam, then turned back to her computer screen. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold and indifferent. Sam swallowed. That simple sentence he had rehearsed had suddenly flown out of his mind. I, he began to stammer. Account. I want to open an account. Miss Vance rolled her eyes. "What kind of account?" she asked, her impatience evident. "Savings or checking? Please be quicker, there are other customers waiting." Sam panicked even more at this brusque attitude. His hands began to tremble. "A savings account," he said, his voice barely audible. "My documents are here." He handed the folder he was holding to Miss Vance with trembling hands. Miss Vance reluctantly took the folder, quickly glancing through the forms inside. The condescending expression on her face became even more pronounced. "These forms are filled out incorrectly," she said sharply. "This part is missing, that part is wrong. Also, some of the signatures are not quite as they should be." She pushed the forms back onto the counter, almost throwing them in Sam's face. "We cannot accept them like this. You will need to come back with someone who can help you, someone who understands these things, like a guardian or an older family member." Sam was shocked. Yet he had checked all the forms over and over. He had even gotten help from the librarian. He was sure everything was correct. But I'm sure I did everything right." He tried to protest. Please, could you look again?" "There's nothing to look at, sir," Miss Vance said, her voice even louder now. "I'm telling you, these documents cannot be processed this way. If you're having trouble understanding, that's your problem, not mine. Now please, I need to take the next customer." The woman's cruel words pierced Sam's heart like arrows. His eyes welled up, and his cheeks flushed with shame and anger. At that moment, all the courage he had gathered, all his dreams, seemed to have collapsed in an instant. Keanu Reeves watched all this from a few steps back, his brow furrowed. Miss Vance's rude, inhumane attitude had deeply shaken him. Sam's innocent helplessness, those trembling hands, those hurt eyes. Keanu understood that he could no longer remain a spectator to this situation. This wasn't just a bank procedure error. This was clear discrimination, clear bullying. And Keanu had always stood tall against such injustices throughout his life. But how would he intervene? How could he help this young man without revealing his identity? And what was the real reason behind Miss Vance's behavior? Was this just an employee's individual rudeness, or was this a general attitude of this bank? As these questions created a storm in Keanu's mind, Sam, having hopelessly turned his back, had begun to walk towards the bank's exit with slumped shoulders. At that moment, it was the moment of decision for Keanu. Either he would remain silent and condone this injustice, or he would do something. Samuel Sam Bell, after Miss Regina Vance's ice-cold, humiliating words, was walking towards the bank's exit, feeling as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His dreams, at that moment, were like invisible glass shards crunching under his feet. All his meticulous preparation for months, the hopes he had accumulated, had suddenly become meaningless. He bowed his head even further to prevent anyone from seeing the hot tears streaming down his cheeks. In that crowded bank hall, he had never felt so alone, so different, and so unwanted. Was his mother right, perhaps? Maybe he really was someone who couldn't handle such complicated matters on his own. This thought was settling on his heart like a heavy weight. Did this cruel world truly have no place for people like him? Just then, just as Sam was drifting into the darkest abyss of despair, a calm yet authoritative voice from behind him suddenly cut through the entire bank hall's murmur. "One moment, please." This voice belonged to Keanu Reeves. He had watched this entire dishonorable scene, his heart aching. And now, the last drop of his patience had run out. He could not allow Sam's innocent dreams to be shattered because of a bank teller's pointless arrogance and insensitivity. He pushed back the hood of his simple sweatshirt slightly, took off his dark sunglasses, though no one could yet fully discern his famous face, and walked slowly but resolutely towards Miss Regina Vance's counter. His steps made a firm sound on the marble floor, drawing the curious gazes around him. Miss Regina Vance was startled by this unexpected intervention. Now this man had appeared after that problematic customer she had just handled. "How may I help you, sir?" she asked, an ill-concealed annoyance and impatience in her voice. "As you can see, we are quite busy." Keanu ignored Miss Vance's insolent tone. His gaze, for a moment, fell on Sam's slumped shoulders walking towards the exit, then returned to Miss Vance. "It was about the young man from just now," he said, his voice calm yet sharp. "I believe you mentioned there was a problem with his account application. Could you perhaps explain that problem in a little more detail?" Miss Vance seemed to be trying to figure out who this man was and what right he had to question her. "Look, sir," she said, raising her voice, "this doesn't concern you at all. Our bank has privacy policies. Besides, that gentleman's documents were incomplete and incorrect. I explained the situation to him. May I please take the next customer?" Keanu did not move from his spot. On the contrary, his stance became even more upright. "You said the documents were incorrect," he repeated. "Well, what exactly was the error? What was missing? Because I saw that young man prepare with extreme meticulousness and check all his documents over and over." Keanu's confident and knowledgeable demeanor surprised Miss Vance. Did this man know that problematic young man? Or was he just another troublemaker? "Who are you to question this?" Miss Vance snapped, her voice even angrier now. "Or are you that young man's lawyer?" Keanu smiled faintly. This smile irritated Miss Vance even more. "No," Keanu said. "I'm not his lawyer. I'm just someone who cannot tolerate injustice and prejudice. And what happened here just now didn't seem like fair treatment to me." These words instantly cast an icy atmosphere in the bank hall. The other customers waiting in line stopped whispering and curiously watched the tense dialogue between these two people. Some appreciated Keanu's courageous outburst, while others seemed to think, "Who does this man think he is, questioning a bank teller?" But everyone shared a common curiosity. Where would this lead? Miss Regina Vance was now flushed crimson with anger. This man was officially challenging her authority. "Look," she said, trying to control her voice, "I'm just doing my job, and our bank has rules. If that young man cannot comply with these rules, that's not my problem. Now please, would you step out of my way?" "Rules?" Keanu asked, his voice now more sarcastic. "Or is it a mentality hidden under the name of rules, one that judges people by their outward appearance, their way of speaking, or their differences? Because it seems to me that young man's real mistake was not fitting into your narrow molds." Miss Vance was now at a loss for words. This man was dismantling all her defense mechanisms one by one. Words were stuck in her throat. Just then, a man in a stylish suit in his 50s, with a serious expression, who had emerged from a room just behind the counters, approached them. This was the bank manager, Mr. Cedric Cooper. Clearly, the unusual commotion and rising voices inside had caught his attention. "Regina, what's happening here?" Mr. Cooper asked, his voice stern and questioning. "What's all this commotion?" Miss Regina Vance, upon seeing her manager, seemed to relax for a moment. Now, they could put this insolent man and that problematic young customer in their place. "Ah, Mr. Cooper," she said with a feigned urgency. "I was just about to call you. This gentleman," she pointed at Keanu, "is questioning me about a customer's personal information, preventing me from doing my job and disturbing the peace of our bank, despite my repeated warnings." Mr. Cedric Cooper first looked at Miss Vance, then at Keanu Reeves, who was listening to her calmly, and finally at Samuel Bell, who was hesitatingly walking towards the exit. There was something unusual about this tableau that immediately caught his attention. But what? And what was this stranger's problem? The bank manager, Mr. Cedric Cooper, approached with his usual confident, authoritative demeanor, his gaze shifting from Miss Regina Vance's feigned distress to Keanu Reeves's calm, observant posture, and finally to Samuel Bell, who had paused near the exit, his shoulders slumped in dejection. Mr. Cooper, a man who prided himself on maintaining order and upholding the bank's prestigious image, immediately sensed that this was more than a routine customer complaint. The tension in the air was thick, and the hushed attention of the other patrons only confirmed his unease. "Regina, what exactly is the issue here?" Mr. Cooper asked, his voice a low growl, his eyes fixed on his employee. Miss Vance, emboldened by her manager's presence, launched into a biased account. "Mr. Cooper, this gentleman," she gestured disdainfully towards Keanu, "is aggressively interfering with bank business. He's questioning my handling of the previous applicant." She chose her words carefully, "and creating a disturbance." Mr. Cooper then turned his appraising gaze upon Keanu. The simple attire, the shadowed face under the cap and sunglasses, nothing about this man screamed VIP. He adopted a condescending tone. "Sir," he began, "while we appreciate customer feedback, bank operations require adherence to specific protocols. If you have a complaint, there are formal channels. Disrupting our staff and other clients is not acceptable." Keanu met Mr. Cooper's gaze directly, his voice even but firm. "My concern, Mr. Cooper, is not with your protocols, but with the blatant lack of respect and empathy shown to Mr. Samuel Bell." He gestured towards Sam. "I witnessed him being treated in a manner that was not just unprofessional, but deeply humiliating. He came here with all his documents, meticulously prepared, only to be dismissed, belittled, and told he needed a guardian simply because your teller," he gave Miss Vance a pointed look, "made an arbitrary judgment based on her own prejudices, perhaps related to Mr. Bell's autism, which requires a little more patience and understanding, not scorn." The mention of autism caused a slight flicker in Mr. Cooper's eyes, a momentary crack in his composed facade. He glanced uneasily at Miss Vance, who paled considerably. This was escalating beyond a simple disgruntled customer. "Autism," Mr. Cooper repeated, a new note of caution in his voice. "Regina, you didn't mention anything about—" I wasn't aware, sir," Miss Vance stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating. "He just seemed confused, and the forms—" "The forms were perfectly fine," Keanu interjected, his voice cutting through her excuses. "I saw them. The only thing confused here, Miss Vance, was your understanding of basic human decency. And yours, Mr. Cooper," he added, turning back to the manager, "if you condone such behavior." The bank hall was now utterly silent, save for the distant hum of computers. Every customer, every employee was a captive audience to this extraordinary confrontation. Sam, near the exit, had stopped, watching with a mixture of fear and a dawning, almost unbelievable, hope. This stranger was fighting for him, for his dignity. Mr. Cooper, realizing the situation was rapidly deteriorating and attracting unwanted attention, some customers were now discreetly filming with their phones, tried to de-escalate. "Sir," he said, addressing Keanu with a forced politeness, "I assure you, Meridian Trust Bank does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. If you and Mr. Bell would care to step into my office, we can discuss this privately and resolve any issues." Keanu stood his ground. "There will be no private discussion, Mr. Cooper," he stated unequivocally. The humiliation Mr. Bell endured was public. The disrespect was public. Therefore, the resolution and the assurance that this will not happen again must also be public. He paused then. In a move that took everyone by surprise, he slowly removed his sunglasses and then his baseball cap. The gasp that rippled through the bank was almost instantaneous. Recognition dawned on faces, followed by stunned disbelief. Whispers erupted, quickly escalating into excited murmurs. "It's him! Keanu Reeves! Oh my God, Keanu Reeves is here!" Miss Regina Vance looked as if she had seen a ghost, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry. Mr. Cedric Cooper's jaw literally dropped. His carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces. The ordinary, interfering man who stood before him, challenging his authority, was one of the most beloved and respected actors in the world. The implications of his and Miss Vance's actions now hit him with the force of a freight train. This was a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. Keanu Reeves, however, seemed unfazed by the commotion his reveal had caused. His focus remained singular. He looked directly at Mr. Cooper, his eyes now holding an undeniable power. "Now, Mr. Cooper," he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority that commanded the entire bank's attention. "Let's talk about those protocols again. And let's talk about how Meridian Trust Bank intends to ensure that every single individual, like Samuel Bell, is treated with the dignity and respect they inherently deserve, regardless of who they are, how they communicate, or how they appear." The manager, pale and sweating, could only nod dumbly. The tables had turned spectacularly. The silent observer had become the voice of justice, and the echo of his words was about to shake the very foundations of Meridian Trust Bank. The revelation of Keanu Reeves's identity sent a palpable shockwave through Meridian Trust Bank. Manager Mr. Cedric Cooper, moments before a figure of stern authority, now looked like a schoolboy caught in a major transgression, his face ashen, his composure utterly gone. Miss Regina Vance, the teller, seemed to shrink behind her counter, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. The customers, who had been a mixture of impatient, curious, and a few silently empathetic, were now a captivated audience, many with phones still discreetly recording. Keanu, his gaze unwavering, did not let the manager off the hook. "Mr. Cooper," he reiterated, his voice calm but firm. "Samuel Bell came here today to take an important step towards his independence. He was prepared, he was respectful. What he received in return was systemic dismissal and public humiliation. This is not about a misunderstanding. This is about a failure of empathy, a failure of your institution to serve all its customers with basic human dignity. Mr. Reeves, I am appalled," Cooper stammered, finally finding his voice, though it was weak and trembling. "This is inexcusable. Miss Vance," he turned a furious glare on the teller, "you have caused this bank an immeasurable amount of damage. Your conduct was deplorable." Miss Vance burst into tears. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Cooper? I didn't mean, You just what, Miss Vance? Keanu interjected, his tone still measured, but with an undeniable undercurrent of disappointment. You just assumed? You just couldn't be bothered to offer a little patience, a little kindness. He looked around the bank. How many other Samuel Bells have walked out of this bank, or places like it, feeling defeated, feeling less than, because someone in a position of small authority decided they weren't worth the effort? A heavy silence filled the room. Several customers nodded in agreement, some looking ashamed of their own earlier impatience. An elderly woman in the queue spoke up, her voice clear despite her age. He's right. They treat you like a nuisance if you're not young and quick. Another man added, My cousin has a speech impediment, similar difficulties. He dreads going to banks. Mr. Cooper looked increasingly panicked as the tide of public opinion turned against his bank. Mr. Reeves, he pleaded, I assure you, immediate action will be taken. We will implement new training, sensitivity programs. Miss Vance will be severely reprimanded. Keanu held up a hand. Reprimands and rushed training programs are a start, Mr. Cooper. But they are not the solution if the underlying culture doesn't change. He then walked over to Samuel, who stood near the entrance, still clutching his documents, watching everything with wide, disbelieving eyes. Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Samuel, he said softly, would you still like to open your account today? Sam looked from Keanu to the now terrified Miss Vance, then back to Keanu. He took a deep breath and nodded, a small, hesitant smile appearing on his face. Yes, please, he whispered. Then, Keanu said, turning back to the counter, addressing Miss Vance directly, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Miss Vance, you will now personally, and with the utmost respect and patience, assist Mr. Bell in opening his savings account. You will explain every step clearly. You will answer every one of his questions, no matter how long it takes. And you will do it with a smile that comes from a place of genuine service, not condescension. Am I understood? Miss Vance, tears streaming down her face, could only nod vigorously. Yes, Mr. Reeves, absolutely. Under Keanu's watchful eye, and with Mr. Cooper observing like a hawk, Miss Vance, now a picture of humility and diligence, guided Samuel through the process. She spoke slowly, clearly, offering assistance at every step. Sam, gaining confidence from Keanu's presence and Miss Vance's changed demeanor, asked his questions, his voice gradually growing stronger. It took time, but the account was opened, flawlessly. When it was done, Sam turned to Keanu, his eyes shining with unshed tears of gratitude. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for believing in me. You did all the hard work, Sam, Keanu replied with a warm smile. You were brave enough to come here today. Never let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. He then looked at Mr. Cooper. I trust Meridian Trust Bank will make a public statement about the steps it will take to ensure inclusivity and respectful treatment for all its customers, especially those with neurodivergence or other disabilities. And I will be watching. My foundation, Keanu added, a new layer of seriousness in his voice, is always looking for institutions willing to make real, systemic change in how they serve the community. Perhaps this incident can be a catalyst for something positive on a larger scale. Mr. Cooper, knowing he was dealing with more than just a celebrity endorsement, but a potential partnership that could redefine his bank's public image, nodded eagerly. Absolutely, Mr. Reeves. We will be in touch. We are committed to making this right, not just for Mr. Bell, but for everyone. As Keanu prepared to leave, several customers approached him, not for autographs, but to thank him for standing up, for giving voice to a frustration many had felt. Keanu accepted their thanks graciously, but reiterated that the real change would come from the bank's sustained actions. He gave Sam a final, encouraging nod. "Go celebrate your new account, Sam. You've earned it." Walking out of Meridian Trust Bank, Keanu Reeves knew this was more than just one good deed. It was a reminder that a single voice speaking up against prejudice could indeed make a difference. The sunlight outside seemed a little brighter. The fight for true empathy and respect was ongoing. But today, a small but significant battle had been won. And for Samuel Bell, it was the first day of a new, more empowered chapter in his life. The ripples of that encounter, Keanu knew, would spread far beyond the walls of that bank. And so, what began as a young man's simple dream to open a bank account transformed into a powerful lesson in dignity, respect, and the extraordinary impact of standing up for one another. Keanu Reeves's quiet intervention not only rectified an injustice, but also sparked a conversation about how we treat those who may seem different. Samuel Bell's courage reminds us that everyone deserves to be met with understanding and a chance to achieve their independence. Remember, empathy is not a passive feeling, but an active choice. Every day we have the opportunity to challenge prejudice and build a more inclusive world, one respectful interaction at a time. Until we meet again on Beyond the Story, for another tale that touches the heart and stirs the soul. May you carry forward the spirit of kindness and courage.